Welcome back. So, let's open up by explaining what happened to me last week. I have flu. So, apparently, I thought it was my nephew. I thought he brought the plague to my house. Running around, he ended up in hospital. Turned out that was an outbreak of a disease called thalassemia, which is a blood disorder, and there was nothing else wrong with him. And I got flu, she got flu, the wife, and it turned out that her company has flu, and they've sent everybody home. They sent her a box of rat tests. We've all showed negative. We haven't showed positive for anything. Just had this really awful flu. But I kind of made it worse for myself. I quit coffee as well. Anyone that knows hardcore coffee drinkers, there is quite a process to giving up this stuff. I was up to 2 a day. I was actually down to 2 a day from several more. But it was still a lot, and I had to get the caffeine out of my system, so I ended up getting really bad headaches, backaches, and you get flu symptoms off of quitting caffeine as well. So all of this stuff added up. So I couldn't come to school last week. I wasn't sure if I had the plague, so I avoided school, worked from home. There was a responsible thing to do, and obviously that was also why I gave up coffee, because I couldn't go out and get it. It's not been that terrible. A few sleepless nights, bit of a bunged up nose now. Wished I was dead. Unfortunately, wasn't that lucky. And it's been really nice to spend all this extra time with the wife.
He's lying!
I'm sure you know what I mean. So yeah, today we're going to move on to explanations. Unit 6. Now I know what you're thinking. Explanations. Well, that's just information reports again. I know you're thinking that because I'm thinking that, and it's really, really lazy. And this book, you guys deserve better. You really do. This is not fair. All they're doing is recycling the same old crap over and over again for you.
This is rubbish!
It's not even a new section in this book. We've had information reports before. You're going to get them again. We've had them in other years. It's just the same old crap. Once I was doing grade 10 and I think 7, but I could be wrong. Could have been 8 or 9 actually. I was doing 2 grades, and we were going through the books, and the books had exactly the same content. All they'd done is change the titles. Each chapter was the same, and they hadn't reworded any of it, and it was ridiculous. So I think you guys deserve better than this. So I do apologise on behalf of the book. It sucks. As Michael Jackson said, they don't care about us. So Unit 6 is explanations. Now we can't skip it either, because last year we did. We did the bit on. Well, let me talk you through what you're going to get. There's a section here on frozen mammoths. Not really very fun. Might go into a bit more depth in this because I've been doing some reading on this stuff about ice ages and climate change, and how climate change as it's taught today is based on 4 faulty studies, bad studies that make no sense. The idea of climate changing by degree is already disproved. Climate change happens in massive chunks. Something like 15,000 years ago, there was a massive spike in cold air, and we got a freeze. We got these frozen mammoths, and that was because probably some sort of thing impacted the planet and changed the climate. Cataclysmic climate change was accepted as the model of how the world works, and that was changed a few years ago by people who want to sell politics. So don't buy into the whole climate change thing. We are affecting the world, but we are about 5% of the change, not the 95% that we're told we are. We don't have the technology for that. We simply don't. And even if we did, it wouldn't be your fault. You know, these huge corporations spewing toxic chemicals into the air and water, they're the ones to blame, not you. So we've got this frozen mammoth section, so I might go into a bit more in that. Yeah, Antarctica. We've got Kampong pastimes. Now, last year I skipped this, and we ended up having to go back to it because general knowledge questions from this, I'm not lying, were in the final exam. And that is really pointless because it doesn't matter if you've remembered top spinning games from this, it doesn't make any sense. So it's a complete waste of time putting this in. So I wouldn't normally bother. We might have to go through it. I think there's one other shaking hands. And shaking hands is actually kind of fun in a classroom up in front of the class. The first year I did it, that's how we did it. We had people, I got volunteers up to the front, showed them how to shake hands and what the different hand gestures mean. It was kind of fun. People liked it and people learned from it. And at the back, I could see in the back of the class, everyone's shaking hands to see how they do it, because you can read a lot about somebody from the way they shake hands. So that was kind of a fun one. I will get an actor, I guess, and we'll film something at the front of the class if we're still in class. If we're still not in class, rather.
Whatever.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything else. Present tenses would do. Oh, forensic science. Not a great one, this. It's only very, very surface. But what we'll do is probably do something else on forensic science or police, that kind of stuff, because there is a lot of interesting stuff there. We'll look at maybe some unsolved mysteries, something like that. So we'll try and make it a bit more fun than it is. Promise no more YouTube projects, because I'm bored of them, you're bored of them now. So we won't do any more of that. Unless we can find a new way to do it. And I can't see any way of making this any more fun than it is, unfortunately. So basically, you've done this before. It's explanations is simply information reports by another name. So it's very, very lazy stuff. We could have done without this chapter. Another teacher said, "Oh, why don't you skip the chapter? Because there's nothing after it. It doesn't get any better." We skip this one, and then we've got what have we got next? Am I going the wrong way? I'm going the wrong way. The picture study. Never do the picture studies. Reports. It's just another information report. It's just the same thing over and over again. We've had the best of it. I think we've skipped comic books. There was a comic book section. Seem to have missed that one. Yetis, the monster of the mountains. That's in reports, which again is information reports. So it's the same thing again. I actually watched an interesting documentary about Sasquatch.
Here we go.
Another Bigfoot thing yesterday. Unfortunately, it's 3 hours long, and the payoff wasn't as good as I hoped, because I was kind of hoping that if it was a 1 hour episode, we could maybe watch it in class. Wasn't as good as I hoped it was going to be. It's okay. This one always gets people's interest slightly, although the Yeti thing in Nepal, I think pretty much debunked now. The relics from it have all been proved to be humanoid remains. But there is some interesting Bigfoot stuff, and if we want to get into that, you guys let me know what you want to go into. We could do cryptozoology. A couple of years ago when we were locked down and I was doing lessons purely online, we went into cryptozoology quite a bit, and we started looking at aliens and all that sort of stuff, giants. And that was pretty interesting because the students are interested. So if you are interested in stuff, don't be afraid to let me know, and then we can develop this stuff. Ginger tea. Making me feel so much better. Oh, God, she's a terrible cook. Explanations, such as it is. Unit 6, page 173. So by the end of this unit, you should be able to stay awake while the teacher is talking, listen for reason, read and understand various kinds of explanations, use grammatical features associated with explanations, use technical terms in neutral language, give an explanation, identify patterns and relationships, and write a description as part of an explanation, and write an explanation using consequences or reasons. So all the stuff you can already do, in other words. There are some grammar points in this one. There wasn't in the last chapter, which is a bit of an effort really getting through that, but there are in this one, and there's tenses, and we will do tenses because you all struggle with tenses, and you all know why. We always slow down and we always do tenses because there are no tenses in your native language, so a lot of people struggle to apply that to English. So any chance we get to slow down and do a language section on tenses, we will do it. So, preview, skip that bit. Overview. Explanations show why something is the way it is or how it works. I agree so far. Explanations usually begin with a general statement about the subject, then it gives a series of statements about how or why the subject came into existence or how it works. So it's an information report, in other words. This series of statements is called the explanation sequence. You already know all this. The statements are often in chronological order. I'm just going to slow down here and say, do you know what chronological order is? Because at this point, we always get someone that says no. Chrono means time. A clock is a chronograph. Chronological means in the order of time. So we can have chronological or reverse chronological order. We've done this before, but chronological order is in the order it happens. So the most logical way there's two logical ways. We can put something in an information report or an explanation into an appropriate order. One is chronological, in the order that they happened. The other is in order of importance. We could also reverse that depending on circumstances. Off the top of my head, if we were going to talk about a news article, chronological would make more sense. Reverse chronological, I guess if we were working backwards from something in terms of a crime. Some crime stories are done that way. We start with the crime, we go back slowly to the beginning to find out who did it. Order of importance would be an instruction manual where we talk about things like a phone. First of all, you've got to know the buttons are the first thing. That's order of importance, not the order in which you have to learn to use it. So putting things together might be order of importance. Everything else would probably be chronological. Explanations can end up summing up the main points. So explanations can end up summing up the main points. I can't imagine how else you'd sum up. It's got a summary at the end, just like a conclusion. Just like an information report, it's got a conclusion where we add no new information, but we cover all of the main points and remind the audience of what's pertinent. This is done in the concluding statement. There we go. Diagrams, flowcharts and illustrations help the reader understand the explanation. Diagrams, flowcharts, illustrations, photographs. Sometimes it's easier to use a photograph. Now, as a writer, I would love to say that's not true. I'd love to say, no, a word has more value than a picture, but that simply isn't true. If I was telling you how to change the spark plug on a motorbike, it's just easier to show you a photograph with an arrow saying there it is, rather than say take this off, it's under there, it's left of this. You don't know what that is. If I say it's underneath the airbox, well, if you don't know what an airbox is, you're still lost. But a photograph saying it's under that plastic thing, everybody can find it. So a photograph sometimes is the easiest, best way forward. So illustrations are of value. Sometimes there's no better way. Sometimes you need a photograph for proof. We're going to be looking at things like Bigfoot and frozen mummies and things like that. So those kind of things require proof. They say the bigger the statement, the more proof it requires. Now, people have forgot we live in a post-fact world where people just talk utter crap.
Thanks, Mr. Biden.
But things require facts, and we've forgotten that, or you've been forced to forget that by your education being dumbed down to the nth degree. Thank you, America. Everything these days is completely spun and nonsense. But fact can be illustrated through pictures. Pictures lie as well. They used to say the camera never lies. You can tell your wife loves you when there's brown things floating in your tea. So pictures lie, people lie, so you have to be very, very careful. Pictures lie more than ever. In the days of Photoshop, and not even Photoshop these days, you can edit, you can move things around, you can crop, and it's very, very easy to do. So it's never been easier to lie by telling the truth. So be very careful of what you believe. Explanations should not be confused with instructions. Instructions have a specific task of giving directions on how to make or do something. Sometimes instructions are included as part of explanations. I mean, I would agree, but I think they're needlessly complicating things because there's nothing else to say. They've run out of things to tell you, so they're just saying things to fill space. An explanation tells you how, an instruction tells you what. If I'm going to instruct you, you're going to do a project, here is what you do. That's a set of instructions. Explanation says, here's how you do it. So the instructions tell you what to do, the explanation tells you how to do that thing. That's the difference. They could have said it that way, but where's the fun in that, right? Explanations often form part of other text types. The following are some examples where explanations can be found. Articles on scientific inventions. Or any invention really. Something I get a lot of in Google at the moment, Google News, is engines. There's a lot of new engines coming out. I don't know if this is because of climate change, such as it is, where people are experimenting with new engines a lot, and they are. There's a lot of new engines using a lot of new fuels, especially hydrogen and biofuels.
I'm so bored.
Now these engines work very similar to petrol engines, but they are different. There was one I was looking at the other day. It wasn't a Wankel turbine, but it was a rotary turbine. The Wankel turbine is a 3-cylindered triangle with sort of curves, and it rotates. And as it rotates, it's got 3 cycles instead of a normal engine's 2. So the Mazda RX-7 had a Wankel rotary turbine. So what you normally find with these engines is they have more power, about a third more power, because it's got 3 cycles instead of just 2. So it's more powerful for the size, but it tends to be very unreliable because the cylinder isn't just moving up and down on an axis, it's rotating, and as it's rotating it's hitting 3 points, so it tends to shake itself apart. So they tend to be very heavy on bearings, and once the bearing goes, they get very hot. It blows all the rubbers out. So they don't tend to be very good engines, but they tend to be very fast. A lot of new engines coming out on various different principles, and yeah, lots of explanations are involved. So I get a lot of explanations on new engines. Chances are none of them will ever work, but it's something that I like to read about. Books showing how machines work. Yeah, I was actually talking to a friend about this. One of my favourite books, and I've never been able to find it since. I borrowed it from a library called The Reluctant Motor Mechanic, and it was about how engines work, cars, motorcycles, because they're all the same really. And it was a breakdown of how engines work for people that didn't care about how engines work. And he said it's a great introduction. If you are interested, it's a good introduction. If you're not interested, it's a good introduction anyway. Give it a go. So I read it, and it was just nicely done. It was just black pages with white illustrations showing very clearly how things worked. Very simple explanations, and it just broke it right down. And reading that book took me from knowing nothing to being able to talk to my friend who's a motor mechanic and have him respect me and think that I knew what I was talking about. And I did. And I could go to him with a problem and say, I think this has happened. And he'd go, oh yeah, sounds like it, you're right. And the book was just that good. So it took the explanations, and I think that the value in that book was in making it simple. It made it accessible to everybody. It was just a really well written, really nicely done book. Never been able to find it since, and that's crazy because that's exactly the kind of book everybody should be reading. Everyone that drives a car or motorcycle should know the basics of how their engines work.
Who cares? Who cares?
Reports about natural phenomenon. It's depressing these days. Natural phenomenon is so poorly represented and so poorly understood. We had a better grasp on science 50 years ago than we do now. Simple as that. Bad science has been promoted by a very small, very rich mainstream, so that people now buy into absolute garbage. And I see this. I see old science teachers quitting the business, and I'm not teaching this because I know it's a lie. I know it's not true. I mean, it's like climate change. We were told back in the 80s we're all going to be dead by now. By the 2000s, we'd all be dead. We'd all be drowned. Water levels are going to rise. Now we're told the same thing. And then it had to be. It was global warming, but then it didn't. We didn't raise 1 degree. So, and the water levels didn't rise at all in 40 years. So they said, okay, now it's climate change. And of course, the climate changes all the time. You can't refute that. I mean, Obama is one of the ones tubbing for this. He's thumping his tub, and he's drumming for this. And you know, he's saying that the water levels are going to rise. We're all going to be underwater. It's the same shit we've heard time and time again. It's the same nonsense. And he just went out and bought a beachfront property. So it's just political gain. So it worries me about this. But yeah, reports of natural phenomena hopefully have explanations in it. Advice on consequences of actions. I would say that's really an explanation. An instruction. Letters giving reasons for actions. It's a bit of a stretch. All textbooks, some brochures, pamphlets and leaflets, yeah, maybe. Television documentaries. These days, because the world has changed, Mostly these days it would be websites. If your company doesn't have a website, you're in trouble. You know, you're not to be taken seriously. I think that's pretty much widely accepted as an absolute fact these days. Everything has a website. Everything has some sort of web presence. So there should be explanations, especially for scientific things. A very good website to check out is Thunderfoot. Maybe if we have time, we'll look at one of his videos. He's a scientist, a research scientist, not quite sure what he does, something in thermodynamics. And he debunks technology, stupid technology that like Elon Musk's Hyperloop, and he just debunks it and says, look, this is why it won't work, because these people are lying to you, and it just breaks it all down. From a genuine scientist, from a scientific perspective, he does a very good explanation of why this makes no sense. And yeah, that's the world we live in. And of course, people like Elon Musk, I mean, I've talked about this before, people invest, and then he doesn't have to give the money back to investors because they've invested, but so he gets to keep it, which of course he's already invested in something else, something more solid. But worse is things like the truck, the Tesla truck. I guarantee that will never see the road. Never ever will that see the road. My take on that, and I could be wrong, my take on that was get the pre-orders in back in what, 2018, 19 when that came out. Get the pre-orders in. People paid a lot of money for pre-orders. They had no intention of making them, and then the economy tanked, even worse. So by the time he gives everybody their money back, years later, when he admits, sorry, the situation's changed, Tesla's changed, we can't be building these things anymore, they're too big, they're too powerful, they don't make sense now economically, it's the wrong choice, so we're going to give you your money back. But of course 3 years has passed and your money is now worthless, because he's taken your $1,000, I don't know how much the deposit was, probably 10 times that. I've taken your $1,000 and I've invested it, and I've turned it into $5,000 over 2 years, and now I'm going to give you back your $1,000, which is now only worth $500. That's how it works. He's a con man, and this is so, I didn't know that, but it's so widely known that back in the UK they lampoon him. There's a show, Spitting Image, where they literally have him as a dancing con man. So yeah, that's a very brief introduction to explanations.
And not short enough it was.
Oh, language. I'm not even going to go through this because it's exactly, it's exactly the same as information reports, and it's exactly the same as the one we're going to do next. So I'm not going to go through that. Instead, what we're going to do is, we're not going to do mammoths because there's only 4 in this whole book. So we're not going to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a short explanation video, and there's going to be a short quiz format thing against it. So move on to the next question on Google Classroom. You'll see there's a short explanation video, 10 minutes, and then just do the questions. Simple as that. And then we'll call that good for today. Thanks very much.